DeMar DeRozan is ranked higher on the NBA small forwards rankings than I expected, even with an all-new role that he's never had before in his career. I'll explain what that role is right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News, and we're continuing looking at these Hoops Hype top 30 player rankings by position. We started with De'Aaron Fox earlier this week, talking about him being the 9th ranked point guard in all of the NBA. Now, I took exception to parts of that. I was not happy with a lot of that, and you can go and watch that episode and break down why I feel like he should be ranked higher, talking about some of the guys that are ranked higher than him. So if you missed that episode, go and check that out. But today we're focusing on DeMar DeRozan, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about these rankings, but we're going to spend most of the time on this podcast talking about DeRozan's unique role. And I say unique because it's not unique to the NBA in the sense that he's going to be playing a role that nobody's ever played before. It's unique to DeRozan. This is a role that DeRozan has never had to play before in his career. And if he can be effective at it, the Sacramento Kings are going to be far more dangerous than if DeMar DeRozan was the 24-point per game scorer that he was last year with the Chicago Bulls as the number one guy. So we'll get into that too. Plus, we're going to talk a little bit about DeMar DeRozan and how he fits into Mike Brown's rotations. Will Mike Brown's rotations change significantly now that DeMar is here? But let's start with these Hoop Hype rankings. I was expecting DeMar to, if he was in the top 10, he was going to be like number 10. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to DeMar. In fact, this is kind of my Kings skepticism coming into play here. Like, I expected people to see DeMar DeRozan, one, get a year older, and two, come to Sacramento, and they would just start to dismiss that. Right? Oh, he's a King. Who cares now? Oh, he's a year older. Who cares now? We've seen some people try and put that out there. The articles that have been written, the takes that have been out there of somehow DeMar DeRozan coming to the Sacramento Kings being a bad move for the Kings or being a bad move for DeMar. So I was surprised by Hoops Hype having DeMar at 8, the 8th best small forward in the NBA. And I was surprised with some of the names that he was put ahead of: Brandon Ingram, Franz Wagner, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby. Now, do I think DeMar DeRozan has been at the best better player than all those guys? 100%. 100%. Like, all four of those guys are trying to reach the status that DeMar DeRozan has achieved at some point in his career. But what I expect DeMar DeRozan to be now for Sacramento, and more importantly, what I expected the perspective to be of what DeMar DeRozan is going to be with the Sacramento Kings, I would expect a Mikal Bridges, who just signed a huge, or they pulled off a huge trade with the New York Knicks, or even Brandon Ingram, who I know he's had his issues in New Orleans, but Brandon Ingram has been an all-star, like a multi-time all-star. Like, he's been praised recently for how effective he's been with the New Orleans Pelicans in recent years, right? I expected those guys specifically to be ranked higher than DeMar. Not that I would choose either of those guys over DeMar DeRozan. Actually, to be fair, if it was a choice between Mikal Bridges and DeMar DeRozan for the Sacramento Kings, given all the circumstances, I would take Mikal Bridges. And I don't think that makes me a bad guy to say that, considering how excited and happy I am that DeMar DeRozan is here. Ultimately, DeMar was achievable. The Kings got DeMar, and it took them significantly less than what the New York Knicks had to give up just to get Mikal Bridges into the Garden. right? So I'm 100% okay with the Kings going the DeMar DeRozan route. But if you were to tell me you can pick one of these players like a schoolyard pick and put on your franchise for the next 3-4 years, Mikal Bridges would be my pick for multiple reasons. But he's ranked lower than DeMar DeRozan on this ranking list. I'm happy to see that. Now, by the way, the guys ranked ahead of him, none of them will surprise you. Jason Tatum, number 1. Kevin Durant, number 2. LeBron James, number 3. Maybe LeBron being 3 might surprise you a little bit. Kawhi Leonard, number 4, is when he plays. Paul George, number 5. Jimmy Butler, number 6. And Scotty Barnes, number 7. Now, Scotty Barnes fits more of kind of the young small forward mold of the Wagner and Bridges and OG Anunoby than he does the other guys that are ahead of DeMar on this list, right? A lot of small forwards. That's what's crazy about this position. A lot of small forwards are yesterday's icons. And that sounds so disrespectful to say, but the generation of the NBA that's starting to fizzle out is very small forward heavy, right? I'm talking about LeBron, Durant, Kawhi, PG, Jimmy Butler, right? The small forward position is stacked with players that were in their prime like 3 to 5 years ago. Again, not meaning to be disrespectful. The torch is being passed to guards and to shooting guards, and maybe at the very, very top centers in Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid, but even they are getting kind of up there in years a little bit. So the small forward position is very interesting because it's ruled the NBA for the last 15 years. But that's not starting to be the case anymore. That being said, Jason Tatum just won the MVP, and he's ranked the number 1 small forward in the NBA on this Hoops Hypes list. Also, interesting to see, Harrison Barnes wasn't on this list, period. Wasn't in the top 30, period. Like, there were guys that were ranked above him in the top 30 that I was like Kelly Oubre was ranked above Harrison Barnes on this top 30 list. Harrison was not even in it. Now, it just dawned on me that maybe that's the case because maybe Harrison Barnes is considered by Hoops Hype a power forward. So I'm literally looking it up right now to make sure, because we're going to be talking about the power forwards list in the future, because I expect our guy Keegan Murray to be on that list. But let's take a look at the 30 power forwards to see if Harrison Barnes just made this really quickly. Again, I'm doing this live. This is terrible for the podcast. I apologize. But so far, we're through 10 and no Harrison Barnes. I just saw Keegan where he's at. It's way too low, but we'll get to that later. It's above Draymond Green, though. I'm happy to say that. Let's see. We're at 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. No Harrison Barnes. So Harrison Barnes is not ranked in the 30 of his position. Whatever his position is, he is not in the top 30. I'm a little surprised by that, but maybe that speaks to, at least in Hoops Hype's eyes, the significant improvement that the Kings made at that position. And again, and Hoops Hype, look, this isn't the end-all, be-all ranking system, right? Like there are other ranking systems that are going to be out there. Hoops Hype is a really, really good site that covers covers NBA basketball, and I enjoy the site immensely. But of course, they're not like the ultimate rankings system in the league. But they're the ranking system that's come out, and it's nice to see recognition for how good DeMar is, regardless of his. In fact, there was acknowledgement in each player and their ranking had a description. And there was an acknowledgement in the description that 1, DeMar DeRozan is a year older, 35. And 2, that DeMar DeRozan's numbers were expected to come down because he was playing in Sacramento with De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and the rest of the Kings crew. But even with the acknowledgement that he's older and his numbers will drop because of his different role in Sacramento, which we're going to talk about at length here in just a little bit, he's still a top 8 small forward in the league just because of how effective he is specifically as a mid-range and clutch scorer. I'm very excited to see that kind of recognition for DeMar DeRozan. So I'm happy to see him ranked top 8 in this Hoops Hype rankings. I don't expect him to be outside of the top 10 by the end of the season, regardless of how different his role is here in Sacramento. Let's talk about that role, what's changing for DeMar. It's a role that he's never, ever had before, but I think it's going to be really, really good for him and really dangerous for everyone else. Before we get into that, though, I want to tell you that today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the site or the app that you need to be using to purchase all of your tickets to whatever event, period. Whether it's Kings games for this upcoming season, massive stadium concerts, or an NFL game at a massive stadium, MLB tickets to your local concerts or local theatrical productions, even a comedy club. Game Time is incredible, and they have this new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And time is important to Game Time because the closer that you buy your tickets to the event itself, the better deals you are going to get, right? Game Time actually rewards you for procrastination. If you want to use that negative term, I look at it as smart business or sometimes just life, right? Maybe you look at a Kings game and early in the week, you're like, I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. Then all of a sudden your schedule opens up or you realize you have more time or you decide, you know what? I really want to go see the Kings take on blah. Well, you buy tickets the day of, you buy tickets the hours before the event, and they're going to be at better deals than you will find anywhere else. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast here. What is DeMar DeRozan's role here with the Sacramento Kings? DeMar DeRozan's role is different to anything he has had anywhere else in his career. We've touched on this a little bit already from DeMar deciding to join the Sacramento Kings or from the Sacramento Kings pulling off the sign and trade to bring DeMar here. For the first time ever in DeMar's career, he's not the go-to first option offensively. It's still De'Aaron Fox. It's going to be De'Aaron Fox. It's well known. DeMar has acknowledged it. And DeMar still, as he shared with us in his introductory press conference, as he shared with Paul George on Paul George's podcast very recently, which you should go and check out, he chose Sacramento over teams like the Clippers, the Lakers, the Heat, because he felt that his chances to win here were the best out of any other team. And that's not because he can come over to Sacramento and take over the Kings and say, this is now DeMar DeRozan's team. No, he wants to join Fox. He wants to join Sabonis, knowing whole well that the guy he was in Chicago, the guy he was in San Antonio, the guy he was in Toronto is not the guy that the Sacramento Kings need every single night here. But a just as efficient or maybe even more efficient, but less prolific, and I say prolific in terms of numbers, that version of that guy can help the Kings win more than if he was the number one guy anywhere else. And if he had gone to LA, for example, he would be the number 3 guy behind LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And clearly he felt that would not be as effective as in Sacramento. Plus, of course, the money that the Kings were willing and able to give him compared to what the Lakers could give him, I'm sure had an impact on that decision as well. DeMar DeRozan is the second option offensively for Sacramento from day one. Sorry, Keegan. Sorry, Malik. Sorry, whoever the hell. Like, that's the way it is. This is still Fox's team offensively, especially with everything that matters to Fox this season, not just getting back to the playoffs and being successful in the playoffs, but Fox needing to make the All-NBA team again to be eligible for the Supermax, right? This is still Fox's team as the star and as the number 1 offensive option. But DeMar is immediate number 2. This will be the most passive to another player that DeMar has ever been in his career, period. He's played with good players in his career. Don't get me wrong. Right? He had a great combination with Kyle Lowry in Toronto, but everybody knew that Kyle Lowry was second fiddle to DeMar DeRozan. He was the dude in San Antonio. He had some good pieces in Chicago, like a Zach LaVine at times, a Kobe White recently. Like, he had some good pieces in Chicago for him to play with. but it was always DeMar's team. DeMar is the number one option. So this will be the most passive he has ever been in his career. And that's not a negative. Passive does not mean he's not trying to get his own looks and he's not looking for his own shots. Passive means that he is behind De'Aaron in terms of the focus offensively for Sacramento, but also the focus defensively for the opponent. And that's the biggest difference here. I would not be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if DeMar drops below 20 points per game. I would not be shocked. Now, that's a pretty steep drop off considering he was scoring 24 points per game with the Bulls last season. Now, Domantas Sabonis also averaged 20 points per game last year. So I, at this point in time, am not expecting the Kings to have 3 20-plus point scorers. If they do, amazing. But I expect one of DeRozan or Sabonis to take a little bit of a dip. I'm picking Sabonis still to be in the 20s over DeRozan simply because of the looks that Domantas Sabonis gets around the rim with his offensive rebounds and his physicality at the rim. But you could flip-flop either one of those for me, and I would not be surprised at all. But if DeMar DeRozan drops below 20 points per game, it's because he's going to be at like 19.4, right? He's not going to fall into like the 16s or 17 range that like Keegan Murray is currently at. And even Keegan can still take a bump up, although many are expecting his numbers to either stay the same or maybe slightly drop with the addition of DeMar DeRozan. I'm not quite a believer in that necessarily. It's because DeRozan is likely to take fewer shots, I feel, than he has, not necessarily in his career, but certainly recently, right? Look at the last few seasons. 17 attempts per game last season, 17 the season before, 20 the season before that, and then back-to-back years in San Antonio of 15 attempts per game. But he's typically around that 17, 18, 19 shots per game range. There are going to be games where he's at that. There are going to be games when he's taking more than that, of course. But I'm expecting his shot attempts period to go down because of the players that are around him. But I think he's going to get more open looks than he's certainly used to getting and maybe he's ever gotten before. There's going to be more attention on other guys than ever before. And if defenses decide to respect DeMar DeRozan for what he's been in the past, which they absolutely should consider doing so, then that's only going to open up more opportunities for Fox or Sabonis or, God, Keegan Murray on the perimeter might not even be guarded at certain points because of how concerned defenses are with packing the middle and packing the paint and making sure Fox, Sabonis, and DeRozan aren't able to get good looks down there. DeRozan is going to be key for the Kings late in the shot clock, late in the game, right? His clutch skill set at the end of possessions and at the end of games is going to be leaned on heavily. And maybe the biggest one, the Kings are going to be leading heavily on DeMar DeRozan to get to the foul line and to convert at a high rate at the foul line like he's done throughout his career. That is what the Kings are going to be leaning heavily on DeMar DeRozan for. DeMar is going to be a specialist in that sense. At the end of games, late in shot clocks, possessions have broken down. DeRozan, just get us a bucket. That's going to be his primary role. And getting to the foul line, drawing fouls, getting teams in foul trouble, and helping the Kings resurrect their free throw shooting from the abysmal depths and abyss that they were in last season to hopefully competency this year to where they won't lose games simply because of their free throw shooting. I've had this question asked to me in different conversations when talking to Kings fans or even just friends of mine. Like, how do he and De'Aaron Fox work together in the clutch specifically? Like, who takes the last shot? That's a fun theoretical conversation to have. But my answer might be boring, but I think it's the best answer to give. Truly, I believe that whoever has the best look, whoever has the best shot, and the Kings making that shot and ultimately winning the game matters way more to both of them than who is taking that shot. In fact, I believe that both of them would happily make the right pass to Keegan Murray in the corner or find Domantas Sabonis on the pick and roll down on the back or like break into the basket, roll into the basket. If that's who hits the shot to ultimately help the Kings win the game or finish a possession strong, if that's what the defense is giving them, Fox and DeRozan are going to make the right play first over the selfish play. Now, there are going to be times when the Kings need either of them to be selfish because they have it going, right? Whoever has the hot hand, hey, maybe just give them the ball, right? But I think it's going to be whoever is the best guy in that spot. Either guy is going to be happy with taking that shot. Now, typically in clutch situations, you see a lot of iso ball, a lot of hero ball. It's very common. I hate it. I hate iso ball. Hate it. But I understand why it happens. I understand it just goes down to basically a one-on-one possession. I understand the greats in this league are good in those spots, like a Luka or a Jason Tatum. And DeMar DeRozan and De'Aaron Fox have been good in those spots before. I do feel that ISO takes away from the whole purpose of having both Fox and DeRozan out there. You have two of the most clutch scorers in the league, if not the most clutch scorers in the league, on the floor at the same time. Why would you voluntarily take one of them out of the play to give the ball to the other, and then the defense doesn't have to worry about the other one because they know the shot's coming from the main one, right? I would hope the Kings would try dedicated sets before relying on isolation hero ball, but I also have these scenarios in my mind of, let's say there's 5 seconds left and the game is tied. And the Kings are inbounding. They call the timeout, so they advance the ball just above half court, and they're inbounding there. Option A might be, hey, inbound and find De'Aaron Fox. But if defense is focused on taking that away, which they've done before, option B might be DeMar DeRozan. Kings inbound the ball to DeMar DeRozan. Maybe he has a look. Maybe defenses scramble to try and catch up and double team him and cut off his view to the basket. And there's Keegan Murray in the corner. Drop off pass, Keegan, wide open 3. That might be the case too. I just hope the Kings run more offensive sets than they rely on isolation ball when both Fox and DeRozan are on the floor at the end of games, unless one of those two is so scorching hot and on fire and it is his night that you're just like, we're riding with this guy. He's going to take us there, or we're not going to get there, right? So those are my feelings on DeMar DeRozan's unique role in Sacramento. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Finally, let's talk a little bit about how DeMar DeRozan fits into Mike Brown's rotations. Mike Brown's rotations are going to be a very big topic of conversation once we get into training camp time and once we get into preseason, right? Particularly the starting shooting guard spot. I'm just warning you ahead of time. Be ready for a lot of conversations about Keon versus Kevin Huerter versus Malik Monk and how Mike Brown staggers his rotations and what do those guys look like and rolls off the bench and blah, 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 blah. There's going to be a lot of dissecting of Mike Brown's rotations come training camp time, which is coming up quick, guys. We're entering mid-September, right? So it's coming up. I'm very excited about that. But how does DeMar fit into Mike Brown's rotation? Well, Mike Brown is going to adapt his rotation, of course, to make sure DeMar DeRozan fits. So there's not like a DeMar, you have to fit or you're sitting on the bench. That, of course, is not happening. It would make a lot of sense for DeRozan to have a very similar rotation pattern to De'Aaron Fox. Remember, De'Aaron was one of the guys that was out of the game first. In fact, he was the guy that was subbed out of the game first. And then Fox typically came back in late first quarter, started the second quarter. It was a rotation that staggered having one of Fox and Sabonis on the floor at all times, which I think will change. I think will stay the same. And it also maximized Fox to be as fresh and ready as possible for big fourth quarter minutes to help the Kings win a game and take a game home. So I expect something. I mean, I would say a similar rotation to that for DeMar DeRozan makes perfect sense because you want DeRozan on the floor as fresh as possible in the fourth quarter where he is also at his best. But the Kings, I feel, and De'Aaron, I feel, needs more consistent scoring throughout the game than they need more throughout the game consistent scoring than DeMar DeRozan, right? If you're looking on one of the two guys to simply be your clutch fourth quarter specialist, let that be DeMar. and let De'Aaron or encourage De'Aaron from first quarter to third quarter to feast on whatever you can, right? We want to see more. We need to see more. And we saw more last season of De'Aaron Fox having 20-point first halves, or De'Aaron Fox entering the fourth quarter just shy or at 30 points already. I think the Kings need more of that. I think, like we talked about in the last episode, I think De'Aaron needs more of that to keep his scoring totals up as high as they need to be in order for him to make All-NBA and be eligible for the Supermax. So I think the Kings will need to maximize Fox's scoring opportunity throughout a game rather than him kind of saving himself or starting slow and then finishing strong like he did 2 years ago for Sacramento. That's more of a role I could see for DeMar. One of Fox, DeRozan, and Sabonis has to be on the floor at all times, and I would argue more often than not, 2 of those 3 guys are going to be on the floor. It just makes sense to do so. And I would argue that it's more important for DeRozan to be on the floor when Fox is off than for Sabonis. Just in my opinion. Because that's where, okay, DeRozan, you can revert back to being that number 1 option. We run things through you. He'll be playing a lot with Malik Monk, and Malik can also do some scoring himself or play off the ball if DeRozan is attacking or whatever the case may be. Like, I think it would be, if you had to choose between the 2 of them, who is on the floor more when Fox is off, DeRozan or Sabonis, I think it's DeMar because of his go-to scoring. That being said, we know how important Sabonis is and the foundation of Sabonis being or at the center of the Kings offense. That being said, too, the Kings still don't have a lot of center depth. No disrespect to Alex Len, right? They're going to go small at the 5 more often than not, I feel, with maybe Trey Lyles playing the 5 at times. So Domantas Sabonis not needing to play big minutes every single night, especially when he's expected to play every single game, and the Kings losing Domantas Sabonis, I wouldn't say it would be as catastrophic as it would have been a couple of years ago, but it would be a significant blow to how the Sacramento Kings play on the offensive end because nobody else other than Nikola Jokic in this league can do what Domantas Sabonis does. Then maybe it would be in the benefit of the Sacramento Kings, the benefit of Mike Brown's rotation too. I'm not saying give Domantas Sabonis less minutes, but rely less upon him to fill and make up for those minutes that De'Aaron Fox is on the floor than the Kings have in the past. Then, of course, we'll talk about closing lineup too and what that closing lineup looks like. On paper, it should be De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. If that's the case, then Fox and Keegan need to put in an absolute shift on defense. Those are the 2 guys that are going to need to step up big defensively. If it is a close game down the stretch and that is your closing lineup, Fox will be guarding the opposing team's best guard more likely than not. And if there's the best wing, Keegan Murray will be on that. If the opposing team has 2 really, really good guards or the best player on the team is a guard and the wings are just okay, maybe you'll see Keegan guarding the guard and Fox will switch onto the wing, or Fox will guard DeRozan's man and DeRozan will drop down a spot to guard the wing. Regardless, defensively, the expectations are going to fall heavily on Fox and Keegan in that closing lineup. But of course, DeRozan's going to be out there. There could be a scenario. In fact, this will probably happen a couple times, and I don't expect him to be happy about it, but this will probably happen at least a couple times this season. There could be a scenario where Malik Monk is out and Keon Ellis is in. Scoring-wise, it's a drop-off, unless Keon is hitting from 3-point range. But defensively, right, if the Kings are just if they're in a defensive battle and they're just trying to secure a lead or hold on to a lead and shut a team down and close it out that way, you're not taking Fox out. You're not taking DeRozan out. You're not taking Sabonis out. And why would you take Keegan out to put Keon in to help you defensively when Keegan is one of your best defenders? So that leaves Malik Monk there. But offensively, this closing lineup of Fox, Monk, DeRozan, Keegan, and Sabonis is absolutely devastating, and I can't wait to see them on the floor together. All right, what are your thoughts on DeMar and where he's ranked out of small forwards? Your thoughts on DeMar's role here in Sacramento? Do you agree with my projected role and what I think it's going to be? Do you want to add anything to it, or do you feel like it needs to be more, it needs to be less? Let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.